Good afternoon, everybody. It's just turned 5 o'clock. This meeting is due to start at 5. I can see that we've got 31, 32, 33 people coming in. People are coming in all the time. So I think we'll start now. And I'm here to do the welcome and introductions. And I shall chair this evening, although I won't be delivering the presentation. That will be done by a colleague of mine. Just to introduce myself, my name's Dave Dixon. I am the Community Engagement Manager for Bath and North East Somerset Council. And tonight I've got two colleagues with me who I'm going to introduce. And the first one is Stephen George. Stephen, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Steve George, Principal Planning Officer in the Planning Policy team with the council.
And hello, my name's Mark Hayward, and I'm a Community Engagement Officer, and I'm here to deal with any questions or comments you have after the meeting and during the meeting. So please use the chat, and we'll direct your questions to Stephen once he's finished his presentation.
Splendid. Thank you, Mark. That's some of the little ground rules for this evening. We're hoping this meeting is going to last about an hour and a quarter, something like that. Depends on the number of questions. Once Stephen starts the presentation, obviously he's not going to be able to see you. So it is important, as Mark has just said, that if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat. Mark and I will pick them up and we'll feed them across to Stephen as and when. But usually the majority of the questions will be dealt with at the end, unless there's something pressing or some clarification is needed during the presentation itself. And can I just remind you, you should have seen the little block that came up that this meeting is going to be recorded. It will go onto the council's YouTube channel, and so it will be able to be seen by yourself again afterwards if you wish, but also by anybody else who has got access to YouTube. So that's all the housekeeping. If we can go straight to the presentation, Stephen, it's over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just share the presentation now. There we go. So hopefully you can all see that. For those that have just joined, my name is Steve George. I'm a principal planner in the planning policy team with the council, and this presentation is about the local plan options consultation that is currently underway, and it's mainly focused on Bath, but also and the surrounding rural areas of Bath. So, just to really set the kind of set the picture for this. At the Baines local plan, we're as a council, we are required to produce a local plan, and it sets out the planning policy framework for Baines for the next 20 years. So you may be aware that we've just recently produced a local plan partial update. That was to update the existing local plan that we had and refresh some of the policies that we had in there, particularly to do with the climate and the nature emergencies, and to update some of the site allocations that we had. But this plan is a new plan, and looking ahead for the next 20 years, as I said, and we'll kind of review the plan on a 5-yearly basis. So the local plan contains spatial priorities and a strategy for how we want the district to change over this period of time, and it includes really 3 broad components. The first one is site allocations, which are more kind of strategic allocations for new development. So, and this will all be based on the evidence base that we commissioned to inform the local plan. And site allocations are principally there to deliver the housing need that we have, but also to meet to meet the need for more offices or for other types of employment, etc. So they can be for all sorts of purposes, but yeah, typically it's specifying the type of development that we want to see on particular sites, and also providing some design requirements there as well, so we can help to shape a development and how that development can integrate into the place in which it sits. And we also have designations in the local plan, and that could be, for example, the green spaces. It could be green belt. I mean, I think that's a tried and tested and a long-standing policy in terms of planning. And there's a broad range of designations that we have they've been quite successful in really protecting areas from development. We also have quite a broad range and a suite of development management policies, and these are used in the determination of planning applications. So they're really important to get right and to ensure they reflect what our priorities are. So the local plan as a whole does reflect the corporate priorities of the council. And as I already mentioned, it reflects the evidence base and existing strategies of the council, and recent consultations and stakeholder engagement. And we've done we've done quite a lot of stakeholder engagement to inform this stage of the local plan. So just to recap where we are, we have the local plan launch document in towards the end of 2022, and during last year we went through a process of looking at the issues, priorities, and the options and sites. And we had a series of community and stakeholder workshops throughout that period, and I'm sure some of you were involved in that process. And we also had a process of engaging with the seldom heard groups. So there was a kind of range of events that we did with those people that wouldn't normally attend those kinds of community workshops. And so the phase we're in now is the options stage. So this is really suggesting options of those three key areas that I outlined earlier on. So we're exploring these options and testing them out, and we really want your input into what you think of those options. And the consultation period is live until the 8th of April. But there'll be sort of ongoing engagement throughout the course of this year, whilst we prepare the draft plan. So the draft plan we hope to get to complete by the end of this year, or maybe early next year. And then we have a formal consultation stage there, which feeds into the examination process. And the examination process is when we have an independent planning inspector who's appointed, and they preside over the public inquiry, and will issue a letter as to whether we can adopt the local plan or not. So we hope to adopt towards the tail end of next year. Just in terms of stakeholder engagement, so this is a slide that reflects some of the issues that people value from a community workshop that we had, a stakeholder workshop that we had. I think this is from September last year, and so they were asked what people value about Bath and its environs. And obviously community is a really important part here, which which I suppose stands to reason, isn't it, when you invite a community representatives to come to a workshop. But also heritage, green, a landscape, walking, access are all really important aspects of the place. So throughout this process, we've started to identify some of the priorities and objectives, and delivering the economic strategy, which has also recently been adopted by the council, and delivering the right homes in the right places, helping to become carbon neutral and nature positive by 2030 are the priorities of the council. And the local plan will also set out a positive strategy for the historic environment. It will support the Bathscape vision and the ambition for a landscape city. It will ensure that Bath facilitates healthy lifestyles and well-being for all. And it will support the universities in their transition towards the provision of enterprise and innovation space. And just on that particular point, there's, and I'll come on to it later on, one of the challenges that we have as a city is meeting all of our objectively assessed needs. And there is an identified need for more student bed spaces. But the council's priority is to address the wider housing need and the employment needs of the city first and foremost. And some of the other priorities and objectives here is to enhance the role of Bath as a place of vibrant, diverse, and world-class culture, to provide for a network of local centres and neighbourhoods that support day-to-day living. And my last point here, and I might add that this isn't any exhaustive list, but it's just pulling out some of the highlights, is to help to deliver Bath's journey to net zero, a transport plan. So some of the challenges and the opportunities that we have in Bath: we have development pressure on the setting of the World Heritage Site, and I'll talk about that later on. We have the opportunity here to really kind of and to refresh and to review some of the existing site allocations that we have, and to make sure they're up to date, and aiming to deliver the kinds of places that we want to see. We've got a piece of work that's reimagining the Newbridge Riverside area, so that's the sort of industrial location to the west of the city. And I've got a slide that's coming up next that I can talk about. I can talk about that area in a bit more detail. And this issue about balancing competing land uses in a place with limited capacity. And we recognised this about 10 years ago when we did the core strategy and the placemaking plan, that there's a limited amount of land in the city to meet all of our needs. And so we were very careful about prioritising which land uses we wanted to see where. Because of all the development that we've seen over the past, I'll say 15 years, I think that particular issue is becoming more and more acute. So we've got to be, I suppose, more and more careful about how we use the limited land that we have left. Building heights and design quality is always a really important point throughout the district, but building heights in particular seems to be a particular issue in Bath. So we need to make sure that we have really clear and robust policy within the local plan to manage that change. I think a key role of the local plan is to provide policy hooks to support and enable different projects and initiatives to be delivered. I think sometimes there's a tendency to see the local plan as the document that can deliver everything. But we certainly have a key role in enabling things and supporting some of the other initiatives that go on in the city. But primarily the local plan is about managing development. So I thought that was just a useful point to mention. So Newbridge Riverside, we're predominantly talking about the area to the north of the river here. The area to the south is what we call Twerton Riverside in the existing policy, and that's largely been built out now. I think there's still a few smaller development parcels to come forward there, but yeah. So this piece of work is really looking at the area to the north, and it's been recognised through the evidence base that we've commissioned on employment land, how important this industrial location is to the economy of the city, particularly if we're talking about sort of retrofitting existing buildings. There needs to be a location where where people can access supplies. That's just one role of this area. But we're also looking at the opportunities to intensify the development potential of this location and some of the sites, providing space for industrial development, for trade counters, for creative industries, for advanced engineering sectors like we have with people like Roadhawk and Horseman, but also looking at sectors like R&D and biosciences as well. And we're seeing this as being complementary to some of the city, to some of the city centre, businesses as well. A key point as well for this area, in trying to reimagine what it might be like, is to ensure that we integrate and we enhance the riverside environment. So it's and it's looking at the ecology of the area. It's also looking about the sustainable transport networks. We have a cycle route that will come through this area. As soon as the Hartwell site can come forward, we can reuse the old railway line that runs through that site. And so lastly on this slide is about working with the Bath Spa University on their Locksbrook 2 proposal and the Creative Industries Hub, which is a sort of joint project working with the council to relocate the fashion collection archive in that area. Just in response to the point I raised earlier on about development on the edge of the city, there's been there's been pressure for quite a long time to consider the options of development on the edge of the city, but we've been very aware that because it's a World Heritage Site and because the setting of the World Heritage Site is one of the 6 attributes of the World Heritage Site, it's an extremely sensitive location, and so we commissioned consultants called land use consultants to assess the potential heritage and landscape impacts of development in this large swathe of land, which really stretches from the Odd Down Park and Ride here around to the west of Bath here, which straddles the A4 corridor. And just focusing on that area, particularly to the west, besides the A4 corridor. I think there are some thoughts that it could be a potentially sustainable a location for new development, but the output of the commission that LUC were appointed to undertake is that it would cause substantial harm to the setting of the World Heritage Site. And it's included in the options document to see if there are any significant public benefits that might be identified that could outweigh the harm to the World Heritage Site. Now, I think it's quite a high bar to do that, but our planning system in the UK does allow public benefits to be considered as to whether they might outweigh harm. So whilst our planning system does allow for this balance, UNESCO do not accept any harm. So if we were to take this forward, and I do not think we have the evidence base to do that, we would I think the status of the World Heritage Site could be under threat from UNESCO. Just a few slides here which are more focused on the rural areas. So some of the priorities to address is about the long-term sustainability and the viability of the villages. So key points here are about the need for additional affordable and other forms of housing, enabling rural economic diversification, and supporting services and facilities whilst maintaining character. And we're proposing two sort of pathways which are intended to be complementary. As one is a sort of parish-led or community-led neighbourhood planning approach, looking at rural exception sites, and the other approach is a local plan-led one, working closely with parishes to explore the opportunities for modest proportionate growth. So nominally, we're suggesting about a 5% growth in the most sustainable villages. I'll just move to this slide here, which is identifying those villages. And there's a process that we went through to identify the more sustainable locations. And it's really looking at the existing facilities that they have there and the transport connections as well. Going back to that slide, so it's about encouraging parishes to actively participate in this process. Looking to identify and explore sites. It's not just for housing. So it's looking at those opportunities to sustain the village, including local services, facilities and employment, and the importance of primary school capacity and optimising journeys to secondary schools. And the key is, of course, working with parishes. So it's also looking at development management policy options. We've got rural exception sites that seeking seeking to better enable rural exception sites and to come forward. So we'll have some options. So we have some options in the options document at the moment, which is about having greater clarity in identifying those villages to which the policy applies, and it could be a bit more flexibility on the size, so up to 20 dwellings rather than it's about 9 at the moment. But that size needs to be proportionate to the village, but also specifying a proportion of market housing, say up to about 40%, to enable these rural exception sites to come forward. So it's looking at a bit more flexibility in trying to encourage a greater take-up of that particular policy. And there's also a policy approach that we're testing on community-led housing. So it's again it's aimed at meeting affordable housing needs on sites that wouldn't normally be appropriate as rural exception sites. And so, should we have a criteria-based a policy for this type of development? And then, lastly, on this slide, there's a policy about facilitating a housing mix to better meet a local need, and that reflects the evidence that we have within each of the areas. In terms of the climate emergency, we're looking again at our policies in terms of this, and we're quite groundbreaking as a local authority in our policies on these subjects. But we'll be looking again as to whether we can go further in terms of the existing policy requirements that we have on that. And there's policy options as well on nature recovery. So the options to increase the biodiversity net gain requirement to a minimum of 20%. So it's turning the screw on that and trying to get more benefit out of that. So that will address the ecological emergency as well. And so in Greenbelt, the villages, we have a proposal here to continue the local plan, partial update, the limited infilling policy, but with the option to ensure the housing meets local needs. So rather than just we have housing that doesn't meet a local need. In terms of the rural economy, protecting locally significant and smaller employment sites, and the existing policy enables farm diversification and prioritises the use of rural buildings for economic uses. Design codes and guidance. So we are now required as a local authority to produce a design code for the whole of the district. Now, quite how we're going to do that, we haven't worked out, because it's quite complicated. But over the course of this year, we will be trying to work this out, and we will be identifying ways of taking this forward, and hopefully working with the community to enable this to happen. The design codes and a design guidance will need to include how we address the climate and the ecological emergencies, building heights, material and form, views, trees and woodland, nature recovery, etc. In terms of Bath, we have some existing design values. So the approach there is to review those to refresh and update, expand, and raise the profile of those existing design values. And over the past few years as well, we've been working with the West of England, and we've produced a placemaking charter, and we've undertaken or we have a design review process that's been established, and it seems to be gaining more and more traction, actually, which is I think really good news in terms of improving the quality of planning applications that we receive. The final slide here on next steps. So just to reiterate that the local plan options consultation closes on the 8th of April. And there's the web address there. It'll take you directly to the website, and we are encouraging you to apply on the web form. It's been set up specifically for you to do that. And then, as I mentioned before, there'll be ongoing engagement and discussions with stakeholders throughout the course of this year to inform the draft plan. And we'll also be commissioning further evidence as appropriate. So the aim is to have the draft plan finalised by the end of this year, and there'll be a formal consultation stage on the draft plan early next year. And we plan to submit to the planning inspectorate by I think about June next year. And that's the end of the presentation. So Dave, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. There's been a whole host of questions that come in, some really interesting questions actually. And on the timetable, funnily enough, the first questions come from Dennis, which was, will the timetable that you've just talked about, will that be impacted by national elections and a period of PERDA that councils have to do, or will the local plan consultation just continue?
We will be affected by PERDA, so that it's kind of unknown. So it depends. Yeah, depends when elections are called, but hopefully the trajectory that we've got will avoid those. Yeah.
Okay, splendid. Because obviously there will be an election between now and January, because obviously there's got to be. Steve Richards, what is proposed for Western Island on Low Bristol Road, and how will traffic be managed in congested roads, including Locksbrook and station roads where heavy vehicles are a problem now? And obviously I know that area very well, and the roads are very narrow in places.
Yeah.
So Western Island?
Well, yeah, for Western Island, it's in the current plan. There was an aspiration, and indeed there was an understanding that First Bus would be leaving that site, and I believe that's still the case. I think for operational reasons, they need to relocate. And there was an aspiration that site could accommodate a relocated uses that are currently on more central sites, and I think we talked about a sorting office potentially, or uses like Travis Perkins, to really free up those sites for some other uses that are perhaps more appropriate for a city centre location. But we don't control those things, so it's quite hard for us to do that or to facilitate that. But we would. It's a bit like a jigsaw piece. We were trying to enable that to happen, or enable the potential for that to happen. But in terms of Western Island, I mean, should First Bus move off that site, then we would seek to protect that for industrial purposes. Although there are proposals out there that is recognised in the local plan options document. There's a proposal by an organisation called Bath Artist Depot, and that's about providing workspace and exhibition space for the artists community. So there could be something of that ilk as well on Western Island, but I think we'll look in that detail as we prepare the draft plan. And just on that point, in terms of transport, well, that will be a consideration when we prepare the draft plan. But one of the benefits of this location is because of the opportunities to link in with the sustainable transport in terms of cycling or public transport.
Okay, I've got a question from John Adler. And if that's John Adler from Freshford, John, it's nice to hear from you. Where the need for additional dwellings has been identified in a community that has a neighbourhood plan in place, are there going to be plans to engage directly with the relevant parish council? I think John must mean Freshford.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a key part of planning and working with communities. So yes, we will absolutely do that as we work towards the local plan, and we will as we work towards the draft plan, we will work with our parishes working on neighbourhood plans, or indeed communities working on neighbourhood plans.
Okay, Dennis, come back with a couple of specific questions. You mentioned about primary school capacity. When you say primary school capacity, is that the physical number of places or the diversity of educational offering, which in some small schools in the villages is difficult to provide? When you talk about primary school capacity, is that actual physical numbers?
It's more to do with physical numbers when we're looking at, if we're looking at new development within a particular community, we'll be looking at the capacity of local schools to absorb more growth, or to physically expand.
And then there's the question, which is a big question about rural areas, about development linked to the availability of good quality broadband. Is there actually anything specifically in the local plan that addresses that need?
There are some existing policies at the moment. I can't recall what they say, or what the detail is, but it would be on the website in terms of the development management policies. So I suggest if you can look there and search that out, there'll be more detail on there. Apologies that I don't know offhand.
We've got a question from Martin about Radstock, Midsummer Norton. They've got significant opportunities providing employment growth. Historically, manufactured goods are moved by canal, then rail, but the current road structure is not adequate to support increased lorry traffic. So has the option to improve routes inside the Summer Valley, Midsummer Norton, Radstock area, upgrade access to the A37, has that been considered in the local plan? I mean, I know that's wider than the Bath and Bath Avon.
So for each of the, we've commissioned consultants to undertake to produce sustainable transport strategies for each of these broad locations. So we have the journey to net zero for Bath. We have a sustainable transport strategy for the wider Cambridge Salford area, and also for the Summer Valley. And so those kinds of issues will be picked up there, but it's about encouraging kind of mode shifts where possible. So encouraging people to use alternative modes of transport where that's possible, but also looking at improvements to facilitate that employment growth that's been mentioned.
A question from Steve Richards around how does the council, or how can the council influence the type of tenure of new housing? Desperate need for social housing, no more student housing damaging local communities, and student HMOs take affordable housing out of the market. So how does the council influence that type of building tenure of new housing?
Well, that's part of the approach that we're taking in the local plan, and the council has endorsed this. But in Bath, we're prioritising the delivery of housing, and we recognise the need that there's a significant need for affordable housing. So we'll be doing everything we can to achieve that. But we're prioritising housing over purpose-built student accommodation. So even though there's a need for that, we are prioritising housing, and on the back of that, we get affordable housing that's delivered. Probably not enough affordable housing in terms of what we need. So we're very keen to look a bit more creatively about how that can be delivered. But it's certainly not an easy one.
A question from
Did that
Martin.
answer all the question?
No, I've got a few more. Honestly, we've got some really interesting questions that have come through. Martin wants to know what actually happens between the 8th of April and the end of 2024, which I think is probably your consultation time frame.
Yeah, we'll be producing the draft plan, so we'll be analysing the responses that we get through the consultation, and we'll be doing more detailed work. So, for example, in Bath, we know we have a certain demand for housing. We know that we have a certain demand for new employment floor space, and so we'll be looking at the existing capacity that we have on sites, and we'll be looking at working out how much we can fit in terms of being responsive to the sensitivities of the place. So there's quite a lot of work that we need to do to produce a draft plan, and perhaps I should have been clearer that the draft plan is the plan that the council wants to adopt. So we have to be a lot more detailed than we have been in the options document, because the options document it's really helping to set a particular direction, I suppose, and the draft plan will be a bit more detailed.
Another question from Dennis, again, a specific one about, is there any discussion in the plan about the larger project plan in the next 5 years, which is the development of the rugby ground?
So the rugby ground is existing policy SB2, and there are options in there to, so the existing policy, and this was agreed about 10 years ago as part of the core strategy. The existing policy allows a stadium to be built on that site, subject to certain criteria in terms of responding to important views, etc. The council made a commitment to review that policy. So in the site allocation SB2 of the Bath section of the options document, we are putting the options out there about retaining the existing policy, or amending the existing policy, or removing that particular requirement of allowing a stadium to be built on that site. So there is an opportunity there for that to be considered as part of this consultation stage.
Okay.
I should just add as well that, I mean, clearly we have a current planning application on that site, and that will be determined against the existing policy that we have, so the adopted policy. If it's the case that that application is not determined, or is refused, or is withdrawn, and we go through the process of say removing that site allocation from the local plan, and then it could be that a future planning application is determined against that a new policy. I hope that makes sense.
Lawrence James has got a question about, within the plan, a proportion of social housing need. Do you believe that that will be satisfied within the plan, proportion of social housing?
The detail on that is in the local housing needs assessment, which is part of the evidence base. So I think we're unlikely to meet all of the social need that we've got. We've always the way that affordable housing is delivered is on the back of market affordable housing, and it doesn't deliver enough in terms of what we need, and unfortunately, but I think that's the fact of the matter. We would like more, but it's the process of delivering it is it's just what the process is. So we try and maximise what we can.
Yeah. Mark's put in for Dennis a very useful link into the development of rural broadband. So there's a link there for Dennis. Steve Richards on that point about affordable housing says affordable housing obviously is not affordable for most people in Bath, which I think you've already kind of addressed at the moment. But then that's much more difficult to deal with in a local plan.
Yeah, I think on a wider level, it's also about improving the transport connectivity to Bath from existing communities that surround it. So it's about providing more. It's recognizing that, and whilst we might be able to try and change that, it's still a fact that it will be more expensive than areas outside. So it's about trying to improve the sustainable transport options, I think.
Yeah, very interesting question from Sally Harris. How will the plan address the depth of inequality across the city, particularly in Twerton and Whiteway? Seeing PBSA, she's written, which is purpose-built student accommodation, proposed for Twerton Riverside, despite social affordable being desperately needed. Is any more detail in about how the plan will look around the issues of inequality?
Yeah, I mean, it is one of the key priorities of the local plan. We will seek to do that, seek to address those inequalities and look at opportunities to address those. I'm afraid I can't be more specific at this stage in terms of how we might do that, but I think it's important that it is a key priority to do that. I just try and see that achieved.
And then I've got a question from Lawrence James again, which again is really, really interesting question. How does the local plan, how do you evaluate the balance between economic and social need within the plan? You've talked about obviously limited land availability. So how is that?
Good question. I mean,
they're good questions.
Yeah, we are trying to balance both of them. And actually, how do you measure that? And it's difficult to say. I mean, because we need an economy and we need housing, so we need both of those things, and we're trying to deliver both of those things at the same time. It's so they're both priorities. It's not that one will trump the other one. And so we're trying to achieve both of it. And whether that means we're trying to have our cake and eat it, I don't know. But
presumably, Steve, if people have got ideas or suggestions or thoughts of their own, they can actually just input that in as part of the consultation, because that is a really fundamental question that's very, very difficult to answer.
Yeah.
Dennis has got something very specific around what consultation have you taken with the regional police crime commissioner in order to develop infrastructure that is suitably secure 24/7? So is there links around building design and control, I presume?
Secure by design, yeah, there will be consultation with the secure by design kind of unit with the police, so there is engagement with them, and particularly, I suppose, in terms of some of the more strategic site allocations that we'd be proposing, and that's the kind of thing that they'd get engaged in fairly early on in the process.
Okay, and then I've got a comment from Steve, which is not necessarily a question, but Steve says perhaps council should be honest with people to state that planning will have little influence on housing development, which is market driven. Which, yeah,
I think planning has an important role to play in shaping that. And that's the important point about what the local plan does, because these developments need to have planning permission. And the local plan is the tool for determining that planning application. So, yeah, we can help to shape it. There are, of course, limitations in what planning can do, but it's the only tool that we've got. So let's make the most of it.
And then a question from Lynn. One contribution on the net zero path is growing more local food and distributing equitably. Can the best horticultural land be designated for that purpose? And can more land in the city area be designated for allotments of community gardens with the health benefits accrued from activity growing and the quality of fresh food? So how do we look at the allotments and horticultural land within the local plan?
That's part of the evidence base that we have that informs the local plan. So there'll be a certain amount of green space that we'd expect to be developed, provided. Sorry, not developed. Slip of the tongue. So, so in a new development, there'd be an expectation that a certain amount of green spaces would be provided of different types, which I would include allotments, for example. But I think it's an interesting point about safeguarding land for horticulture, etc. And I would encourage you to put comments in as part of the consultation on that, particularly if there are specific sites that you have in mind.
Dennis, is there any priority given development of the river and the canal structure that we presently have? I know you've mentioned stuff around down at Newbridge.
What, in terms of the infrastructure?
Yeah, I suppose priority given to the development of the river and canal structure. Some of the, I suppose, the larger development sites down to the west of the city follow the river, don't they?
Yeah. So it's responding to the riverside environment or the canal side environment. That would be part of the context and how development would relate to that. I mean, for example, the river is an important back corridor, so that's really an important point about, say, lighting and the proximity of development to that river, river corridor. Yeah. Not sure if that answers the question that was asked, but.
And then there's a question from Susan. Would the plan specifically offer options for low impact and affordable eco housing, which combine with growing space? So is there that field within the plan about low impact housing?
We would seek to achieve that in the policy, so we would be promoting that. And I think again that's a really important point to emphasize in the responses. If we, we could allocate a specific site for that would meet those criteria. Not sure if we would actually. I mean, we have done that, and it's where planning can be a bit of a blunt tool in requiring specific forms of housing as part of a larger housing development. But we'll try and do that, and actually the National Planning Policy Framework, which is our government's a sort of national policy that the local plan needs to be broadly in line with. It is saying those things more and more. So actually there may be increasing opportunities for us to be more specific in requiring the type, being specific in terms of the types of housing that we require on site.
And then finally, I've just got one question that was asked of me before this meeting, which was about obviously 30% of the population of the city are students, but another really interesting figure, I think it came from Age UK, one of our third sector partners, is that 30% of the population of Bath and North East Somerset are over 65, and that population number percentage is set to increase. So how, with the local plan looking forward, the question kind of was, with the local plan looking forward, how are we going to deal with a rapidly aging population where there are going to be more and more older people all wanting to live, particularly in the city and some of the larger villages?
Yeah. But I think that's so a lot of that I think is about a design quality of new housing. So people can stay in their homes for longer. So the homes are adaptable, but also environments are adaptable, and people can get around, and there's local facilities nearby. public transport nearby that's good and reliable. But it's also providing for, I suppose, later on in terms of looking at those housing needs where there's particular care needs that are required. So we'll need to look at that as part of the local plan as well, and have policies that can allow that kind of development to come forward.
Brilliant. There's no more questions in the chat, Steve. I feel like you've been given a bit of a 15-minute grilling there. There's been some really interesting, detailed questions. Thank you ever so much for everybody that has taken part and has inputted into that. Please do go on the website. Please do put any ideas and views and suggestions and opportunities that you can into the consultation process, because obviously they will. Steve and the team will write that up, and they will be coming back to you. Mark, you've got your hand up.
I have, Dave. Yeah, just one quick question for Stephen. We're encouraging people to respond to this consultation online. If we've got any of our residents that find it not possible to do that, what alternatives are there for them to be able to get in contact?
Yeah, they could write in if needed. So yeah, we're certainly open to that. But we would encourage people to use the web form if possible, and you're able to do so.
Great,
Brilliant.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for raising that.
Thank you.
I'd forgotten that bit. We're almost at 6 o'clock, and I'd like to say a really big thank you. We had at the peak about 53 people that were actually attending the meeting, which is a really good number. Please get involved in the consultation, because although it will take some time to unfold, some of the conversations and discussions that we're having now will be seen as things in the ground in the next 7, 8, 9 years time. So it is actually really important. I think that's probably it, Mark. I've not forgotten anything else, have I? No. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for coming along. And as I said, the meeting has been recorded. If you want to go back and see any particular bits again, then please do. And it will be on the council's YouTube channel. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.